Here you can assume that he has some device that allows him to eavesdrop. Well, yesterday we talked about this story. Today is the second day of what I would call intense searching. Well, it all comes down to whether the police will find this man and what's happening with him. Yesterday we discussed that there are different possibilities. It seems today that all these possibilities are still in play. So, first of all, the fact that he is somewhere in that forest. We have to remember the information that he's a hunter has not been confirmed. However, there are people who said they saw him with a weapon in the forest. It's not impossible, since some reports suggest he might just be a poacher. But either way, it's a person who knows the area, who is there, who walks around, who was simply born there and lives there. So naturally, finding him in all of this will be extremely difficult. You also have to remember that this is an area full of forests with lots of tourist trails. After all, Limanowa is known as the starting point for various kinds of hikes, and now the holidays have already started on the trails. There are a lot of people. I'm wondering about a few things, of course, but one of them is what happened with the car. We remember that this happened around 10 or 11 o'clock. The car was found not far away before 2 p.m., so that's 3 hours. In 3 hours you can drive several hundred kilometers by car. Meanwhile, that car didn't travel that far. Now the question is, did he drive that car himself, or does he have an accomplice, which can't be ruled out, who simply dropped off the car after a few hours, obviously to throw off the trail? And that's possible. It's obviously possible that he simply switched to another car, for example, that man's car, and is on the run. Well, I'm a bit worried that so many hours have passed and there's still no clear trace. And the fact that there's no clear trace is shown by the fact that this morning the police are bringing in large forces to the scene. These are police officers from practically all over Poland. Well, I suppose the quickest way was to mobilize police officers from Katowice or from Rzeszów. That's right, that's how it usually goes. And from Kielce too, so they'll arrive first. You also have to remember that it's the weekend, that people have to be called from home, they have to be put into cars. Well, it's a big, I wouldn't say logistical undertaking, but I think so. Well, first of all, there isn't any clear indication that the police are expanding the search. Unfortunately, as I know this area, it's a bit like looking for a needle in a haystack forest. Maybe that's a bad comparison, but remember that in the Limanowa area, from 1939 until the 50s, as far as I recall, and it works effectively, so that's proof that you can simply hide there. All the more so for someone who knows these forests. Well, first of all, the assumption is, of course, that he's alive, that he's hiding, that he has some kind of hideout. Maybe he prepared all of this earlier and he's just trying to wait it out. Of course, you can't search forever. At some point, you'll have to give up from a logical point of view. At some point, the police will say, there's no other way. Well, we've done everything humanly possible and there's no trace of him. Of course, the hope lies with people, but usually it's like this. People will keep looking and watching for a long time. But in a place with so many tourists, of course, it's hard to suspect every tourist. So that's obviously difficult too. Usually, after some time, people just forget. And maybe that's exactly what he's counting on. Yesterday I also said that it seemed to me that this man did it in some kind of frenzy. He was overtaken by rage and started shooting. Today, after these new facts that we know, I don't think that way anymore. And we can't rule out whether he planned all of this, whether he prepared for it. And that would be further proof that he was looking for some kind of escape and a place where he could hide. Why do I think so? Well, for example, because he first went to his mother-in-law. He shot at her there. He probably thought he had killed her. And then he walked several hundred meters. People give different numbers, but it's around 400 or 500 meters when someone is furious. But after walking such a distance, you can calm down. He didn't calm down, and he kept going. And he also shot his daughter and son-in-law. So I don't rule out that he simply planned and anticipated all of this, and he simply carried it out on that particular day by shooting at members of his own family. That goes back to the motives we talked about. As you can see from this, it had all been going on for many years. It talks about abuse there. It turns out he already had his first charges back in 2022. So it must have started a few years earlier. 2022 means 3 more years have passed. So we can see from this that this period of prolonged stress, it lasted at least 6 or 7 years, maybe more. Few things are worse for a person than prolonged stress. It can really wear you down. He faced his first charges in 22 and the last in 25. So he faced charges recently. He had a restraining order from his family. He couldn't come closer than 50 meters. That must have caused additional frustration, that he simply can't approach his family because the police could arrest him. I'm saying that's one possible motive, that he anticipated it. And I think today it's just as likely, just like, of course, the other one, that he went into the forest. He left the car there, assuming he was the one driving it. Around the same time, near that place, some gunshots were heard. Apparently, there were several shots. Who was shooting? Why? But the coincidence is that his car was abandoned there and someone was shooting. It seems likely that he might have been the one who fired the shots. Did he shoot at himself or did he shoot for another reason? Of course, it's hard to speculate now.
That question always comes up. Could it have been prevented?
Yes, people ask if it could have been prevented. In my opinion, no. Because after all, there are probably hundreds of thousands of abuse cases in Poland. You can't predict that one day the person who is the perpetrator, the abuser, will take such a step. I also think about all of this because after all, we all remember the Jaworek case. I also think that the fact that the police are bringing in these forces today, let's not kid ourselves, the Jaworek case is a bit of a stain because we know that for a long time. For several years, it looks like Jaworek. It's almost a very similar story, a copy. He also shot members of his own family, his brother, his sister-in-law, his nephew, or maybe his niece's son. Well, I would say it's the same kind of cruel scale. At that time, he was hidden by an older lady, an aunt everyone overlooked. I think that was a mistake. That should have been taken into account. You can't have a family member on the sidelines of all this and not keep them under control. I think today the police don't want to repeat that mistake. In my opinion, that was a mistake, so, which is why there are such strong forces and commitment. And the police are going above and beyond, as searching the area is just one part of their efforts. But it's also hard to rule anything out today because the border is so close that he crossed the border, even through the so-called green border, and he could simply already be in another country using help from some of his buddies, for example. You have to consider that as well, of course. Or maybe he just went somewhere in Poland to hide. Yeah. To sum up what's happening today, because we've been observing this for the second day in a row, there's no breakthrough. There are also no clear traces. The police want to do everything to avoid making a mistake, to make sure he doesn't slip away, assuming he's still there. So that's why they're bringing in more officers to make the perimeter, the cordon strong and tight. And they will slowly search the area. Of course, there are tracking dogs, drones, there's a Black Hawk helicopter, so the police are using all their best resources. The problem is, of course, that it's warm, it's summer, and a thermal imaging camera works best when, as the name suggests, there's a temperature difference. When it's cold, so here it probably won't be very effective in helping in any meaningful way. As for tracking animals, and especially tracking dogs, that could also be a problem because after all it's a forest. There are animal scents and droppings there, unfortunately, that can also interfere. But such searching drones, all of that definitely helps. Either way, it just has to be done. There's no other way. However, The fact that you can hide there and stay hidden for a long time, as long as you have food, that's definitely possible. If he didn't have a plan and doesn't have food, then I think we still need to appeal to the people who live there, first of all, to stay alert. And secondly, this is a frustrated, dangerous man with a weapon. He will want to eat, he will want to drink, he will want to go out, check what's happening, so anyone who gets in his way could be in danger, and we need to remember that and be careful. Of course, we shouldn't take matters into our own hands, because that's an additional danger unless someone is trained, like a police officer or a soldier with a weapon. Well, that's obviously his decision, and credit to him for that. But as a rule, of course not. But informing the police, yes. And right, that just reminded me again about informing the police, because there were accusations that the police showed his photo quite late, that it could have been done earlier, that he could have been caught. Well, I know from experience that showing this kind of photo is a problem, because when you show a wanted person's photo, people from all over Poland call in good faith saying they've seen him. Yesterday, I received 2 phone calls from people who know me saying they saw him in Krakow. I myself, to be honest, had a dilemma about what to do, whether to call the duty officer and tell him that someone reported to the duty officer, probably the police, that a suspicious person was seen there. Well, it seems unlikely to me. He would have to send a patrol car there to check. You have to take into account that when you publish photos and chase after a guy like that, there are probably thousands, tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of such calls all over Poland, so it's a real nuisance, and practically checking all of them is impossible.
Nevertheless, the police also used, which is unusual, the RCB alert.
Exactly, the RCB alert, well, I would say it's a necessity in such a situation. It's an alert. Government Security Center issues it when human health or life may be at risk. That's the case with floods, that's the case with landslides, winds. After all, we recently received such a warning, or hail, and that's also the case with this guy who's on the run with a weapon somewhere in the area, I would say. Well, let's say for now Limanowa, but that might not be entirely true. He could practically be in many other places. Well, this is a dangerous man. He killed 2 people. He probably thinks he killed 3, although if he was driving that car, he was probably listening to the radio and learned from it that his mother-in-law survived. But in all of this, it just doesn't really matter to him. He faces life imprisonment. He will be examined, but I would say that the punishment, if experts find he was sane, as it appears, he'll get life without parole, so he has a reason to fight, making him potentially even more dangerous.
Regarding the perpetrator listening to the radio, is it possible that he is actually monitoring and watching what is happening? And could the information about the search somehow help him hide more effectively?
That is, usually the police say very little about the search. They only mention the area. Also, if they communicate with each other, they do it in a way that no one can eavesdrop. Well, of course, you can assume here that he has some device that allows him to eavesdrop, but you can't rule out that one of his buddies is helping him, someone who's just out there driving around, listening in, and can provide him with information about where the police are and where the search is concentrated. That's why you have to be very careful, and usually you don't say, at least I haven't seen that kind of information today, except for where the police are searching. But you also have to remember that some information is just meant to mislead. It's so that everyone thinks the search is happening right there.